is April 1st, 2009. We're at the home of Mr. Henry Detterer at his home in Windsor, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Henry, and thanks for participating in the project today. Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family and growing up.
Well, I was born in Windsor, Colorado at January 8th, 1925, and we lived about a mile and a half east of Windsor first, on a farm. And
Did you have brothers and sisters?
yeah, I had a brother and a sister, and the brother passed away here just a year ago, and sister's still alive, and she's here in Windsor too.
And I take it your father was a farmer then?
Yeah, my folks, they was on a farm and farming all the time until we took over from them,
Uh-huh.
So,
Okay. And you went all through the school system here in Windsor then?
And schooling, I went through all the school system here at Windsor, but I didn't finish my high school.
Oh, is that right?
I knew the time was coming that I might have to leave, so I says I'm going to quit now and go from there.
Is that right? Yeah. And it quit to enlist in the service?
I started 12th grade there, yeah, and I figured I'm going to have to go, and so I quit. And I was deferred one time, and then the second time when they called me, then I knew I had to go again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
well, we was on this farm right here,
Is that right?
and well, at that time I didn't think much of it, but I know there was a lot of friends and boys, boys that I knew, in Windsor that had to go, and that's why I said it was time for me to go then too,
Is that right? Now, you said you had enlisted in the Navy, correct?
Well, the funny part of it was May the 30th of 44 that I had to go, and I went down to Denver, and they asked me what I wanted, and I said, well, I want the Army. It didn't turn out that way. I went to the Navy.
Is that right?
So,
Where did where did you ship off then to for your basic?
well, I went to boot camp at Farragut, Idaho, and went through my basic training there, and I think it was 8 weeks that we had that, and then I had to leave, and I come home, and then after 14 days it was over with, I went back, and they sent me to Bremerton, Washington, and I was in a kind of a camp there for about a half a week or so a week, and I got an assignment to go on to the Yorktown, and there was a dried off right in Bremerton there, and just an aboard ship there then.
Now, when you went off to serve, did you go off with buddies or did you go off alone?
Well, I was actually alone, and so.
How was that? I mean, many like your generation probably grew up here in Windsor, didn't travel too far away, and hadn't been away from home. Well, how was that transition from?
Well, I was a little bit worried whether I was going to be going the right directions, and it was kind of scary.
How was that transition from civilian life into military life for you?
Well, it was a big change.
Yeah.
It was a big change for me, and like when I was assigned to the Yorktown, and I walked down. The ship was in dry dock at that time, and when I walked down the pier, and they said, well, that's the ship that I'm assigned to. And I looked at it, and I said, that thing don't float. They were so big there, and that's the first ship I ever seen, I said, well, that don't float. It did though.
Oh, be darned. And then how long were you there before you guys shipped out?
Well, I went aboard August the 28th when I was assigned to it, and
August 28th of what year?
44.
44, okay.
And then in October the 10th, probably we went out to sea then.
Okay. All right. Well, once again, here's this farm boy from Windsor, Colorado, going out to sea. How was that for you? Did you get your sea legs, or how did that work out for you?
Well, I just had to get used to it.
Did you get seasick?
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't get seasick, so I was fortunate that everything went all right for me, you know. But I was kind of worried now that I might get it, and I was worried that I might get sick or something like that. But
Huh.
um,
So where did you guys then sail to from
Well, we
Washington?
we went from Washington down to San Francisco, you know, and to get on some more supplies and stuff like that. And we was there only about a day or two, and we went out to sea then. And we went well then we stopped at Pearl Harbor for a day or two there, you know, and then we left there and went on out to the South Pacific.
Was there while in Pearl Harbor, was there much damage remaining from the, or they pretty much cleaned up the harbor from the attack at that point?
Well, actually, I didn't see too much. I'll be honest with you, I didn't see none in there. But then, well, the harbor was kind of open, you know, and trees all around, and that, you know, and but we never seen the ships or
Oh, okay,
nothing
yeah.
like that, you know.
You just stay on board though?
We stayed, yeah, well, yeah, we had a liberty there for a day, so we went ashore and we got on them little boats and they took us on in and made liberty for a day there.
Once again, how was it for this Windsor boy in tropical Hawaii? What was that like?
Well, it was all new,
Yeah.
and we had to make sure that we got to see what we wanted to see, and then we make sure that we got back to the ship again. We didn't want to be left alone out there because we
Right.
didn't know nothing about it, so we wanted to make sure we got back to the ship all right.
And then from Hawaii, you sailed out. Did you have any idea where you were sailing to from Hawaii, or did you have your orders yet?
No, we didn't have enough.
Yeah.
I had no idea where we was going to heading for. I knew we was going to go out to South Pacific someplace, and
Did that uncertainty bother you at all, not knowing where you were going, or?
well, we was kept busy all the time on the ship there, you know, so we wasn't really worried where we was going or how long we was going to be there,
Yeah.
or
Now, what was your main duty on the ship?
I was up on the flight deck and in the air department, and we had to handle the airplanes, you know, push them around to get them in spot, you know, that there's lined up the rides, you know, and then we had to pull chocks to get block the wheels, you know, and we pulled them, and then we had to help on the bombers. We had to help spread the wings on them because they was too heavy, and so we had to help on bring the wings up on them because they all the planes folded their wings, you know, and so, and then
This is a fairly dangerous assignment with all propellers running, and so you had to be on your toes all the time, I would think.
that was sure. And when I think back now, I can't believe that we done that because that was dangerous.
Yeah.
Because them planes they was parked side by side, like the one wing from one plane to the other. There was only about a foot in between there, and we had to crawl in underneath there, pull them chocks, and then help spread the wings. And on. The fighters they spread the wings themselves, you know, and the bombers. But the torpedo plane, well, we always had to help put the wings up because it was too heavy, you know, the wings. And then we had to reach underneath, and I've done that most of the time, reach underneath to make sure that that pin was locked in the right place, you know.
To keep the wings.
From so we had to reach up in there and make sure that that pin was in the right place, and that was a good thing that no one got his finger there or something like that, you know. But then it all worked out.
Wow. Were you fortunate enough? Did you ever get injured at all? Hurt at all during?
No, I never did get injured.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that I made it all right.
To give us an idea, roughly how many planes would be on deck that you'd prepare at a time? Roughly.
Well, all the Yorktown carried between 90 to 100 planes at a time, you know.
Wow.
And there'd be about 40 of them maybe on the hangar deck, and 60 or so up on top of the flight deck. There's a picture.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that later. You can
And
give.
that's well, like I say, 40 or so on the hangar deck and 60 on flight deck.
Hmm. Talk a little bit about life aboard an aircraft carrier. What was living conditions like, sleeping conditions? How was the food? What did you guys do for entertainment? Talk just a little bit about that floating city.
Well, we always had our meals are always there. We didn't have to worry about missing a meal, you know. And
How was the quality of the food?
well, it was good enough. I can't complain. But there's a few of them that was, and if we didn't like something, well, we didn't go. We just ignored and missed it, you know. But and it was actually okay, you know. It wasn't that bad. I know skim, well, that what do they call that? Modular, when it's milk. What do they call that? Milk, you know, that skim. Not
Powdered
skim,
milk?
Powdered milk, yeah, powdered milk, yeah. I didn't care for it, but then, you know.
Sure, coming from the farm where you got fresh milk from the.
Well, it didn't taste like the fresh milk, though. And then for cereal, and that's why we had to have the milk, you know, and then even that powdered potatoes and that, I never did care too much for that either, but we had to eat it, though, you know, if you wanted to keep our strength up.
And what about sleeping conditions? How were what was that like?
Well, we had good quarters and nice bunks, you know, that we sleeping in, you know, and it was not too bad. When I first got aboard the ship, why, I was in one little compartment, about the second or third deck down below the hangar deck, you know, and it was a nice little compartment, and I was up on the top bunk, and there's 3 high, you know, and so I had pretty nice there, you know, and so.
What would you do when you weren't on duty? What would you do on your time off for entertainment and to pass the time?
Well, a lot of the guys, you know, they played cards and stuff like that, you know, but I was no card player, so I didn't do that. So what I done, I walked the ship, you know. I went places where I wasn't maybe supposed to be at times, but I just wanted to see what. And I used to always go way up on forward to the bow, you know. It was underneath the hangar deck, and I could see all the water out there, you know.
Oh, it must have been a sight.
And it was nice, actually, and nice and cool all the time, or the breeze, you know, and it was.
Generally, how long at a time would you guys be out at sea?
Well, there was one time we were 78 days without seeing land. And I marked it down here, that 78 days, you know, without seeing land. That was more towards the last of the war, you know. So.
Was it once you finally got to land and went to shore? Was it hard to walk again, or were you thrown off at all by?
Well, We got a little bit of sea legs, you know, but it wasn't that bad. But like the ones that was on the destroyer and something like that, was they really got sea legs, you
Oh,
know.
okay.
Because a big ship,
The-
it rocked, but it wasn't that bad, you know.
Okay. Well, let's
But,
start. Let's start then from leaving Hawaii. If you want to take us on the route you went and some of the battles you guys were involved in, and just kind of walk us through that story, if you could.
oh boy.
And once again, dates and particular places aren't that important. So if you can't remember, it's certainly understandable.
Well, we first, as far as I know, we went out to the Philippines and the Philippine Islands, and we had to send our planes, you know, in and make, well, the, how should I say that now? Well, the planes went in, you know, and got everything ready for the soldiers, you know, so that they could come in too, you know, and
Was this for the invasion of the Philippines?
yeah, see, the first time MacArthur was in charge of that, and he left the Philippines because they couldn't hold it anymore, and so they left, and then, well, then I was on board ship while we went out and started bombing all the Japanese places and the stuff that was on the island there in the Philippines, and got it ready so that
Kind of to
that
soften everything up
so,
for the invasion.
so that they MacArthur come back again and took it over then, you know. So
Well, now let's back up a little bit. Maybe you could tell a little bit of the history of the Yorktown. It sounds like it had a pretty rough go, I imagine, before you climbed on board. Didn't it? If I'm if I remember right, wasn't it one of the carriers that got pretty damaged earlier in the war?
well, I was on the second Yorktown. The first one got sunk.
Okay,
At
okay,
the first one got sunk at Midway,
okay. All right, that's what I'm
and,
thinking of then.
and that was in '43, I think, when she got sunk. Or 43, I think so. And then they made this new Yorktown,
Okay, okay,
and she was launched in '43, and was thrown out on aboard there then.
okay. So I imagine, like for example, when you guys came up to Philippines and were uh, running bombing runs and such, things got pretty hectic there, getting planes on and off the carrier. Busy times.
Well, when it was pretty busy at times, yeah. They sent maybe like 15 fighter planes and then maybe 5 or 10 bombers off, you know, and maybe a few torpedo planes. And so we had to have that all lined up right on the deck so that in order, I mean, first the fires went off first, and then the bombers, and torpedo planes, you know.
And then what would be your responsibility when they came back? What would you help lift the wings back up and get them down below deck, or what?
Well, no, we didn't have to help on the wings there because they had enough power to bring it. But then when they, and so we had to, we stood on the side and of the deck, and as soon as there was the pilot left the plane, well, then we had to push it in the spot, you know, when they come in on the back on the back part of the ship, we had to put them up in the forward part to get it out of the way, so the other planes had enough room to land on. You know, we had to keep that all nice and clean all the time and make sure that they wouldn't run into each other. And there's sometimes one of the planes would come in and that didn't grab the tail hook, didn't grab the resting gear, you know, and then they went into another resting gear that was higher up and run into them, you know, and sometimes they even cut cables in once in a while with the propeller, but then there's enough resting gear to stop them, you know, that they wouldn't go up and run into other planes that was aboard already, you know.
Mm. Mm. Was there ever any crashes on the deck while you were?
Yes, it was.
What was that like? That had to be frightening.
It was frightening, yes. Yeah, there's somebody come in, that one especially come in and he did miss, get his tail hooked on a resting gear, you know, and he come up and hit the 5-inch gun mount that was inside the ship, you know, and tore the wing right off, you know, till they stopped him there then.
Wow. Wow. So your responsibilities were always up on top deck?
Right on top of the deck,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then from the Philippines, where'd you guys go to?
Then when we had to get supplies and that, we went back to the Ulithi Islands, and this one little island they called Mogmog, and we went got to go ashore on that for Liberty for an hour or two, you know, at a time, and it was kind of nice, but then I wouldn't want nothing to do with them islands. They was all full of little lizards and stuff like that.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. And then you resupplied, and then where'd you go from there?
Well, is that sheet out there? I'm gonna have to let you look at that.
Yeah. Betty's gonna grab it. Yeah.
Okay, well, the carriers, well, we was always in the third. These are the battles that actually I was all in from that line on down.
Okay.
So.
So it looks like, boy, once you boarded, you start in the Philippines and just start working your way up to Japan then.
Japan,
yeah.
yeah.
Helped, boy, quite a few battles. How was it as far as communicating back home? As far as, were you able to get mail back and forth? Was that pretty consistent? Did with your folks? I don't know. Did you know Betty? Did you know him at that time?
I was still in the 5th grade.
Oh, okay.
I didn't even know he existed.
Oh, okay.
Well, then I made a note that I had to be especially thankful to my sister. She wrote me for every, about 2 or 3 times a week, you know.
Is that right?
And we got our mail maybe once or twice a week out there, you know. And sometimes it may be 2 weeks before we got mail. So either you had a bunch of it at one time or hardly none, you know, maybe.
So that mail meant a lot to you, to get that mail from those letters from your sister?
Oh, yeah. So she kept me informed what they was always doing at home here and about who was on the farm helping out and stuff like that, you know.
But in the other way, sending letters back, you could never tell them where you were at. Is that right? It was censored and.
It was when we wrote back. Well, there was nothing. Actually, there's nothing to talk about, you know. And you couldn't say where it was at or nothing like that. Because there's a couple times I wrote down, you know, and I tried to work some in there, but then when Lieutenant Smith got a hold of that letter and he crossed that all out and censored it. And,
did your after the war and you were back home, did your sister or your parents ever talk about how what they were going through, how they were feeling, knowing that you were over in harm's way but had no idea how you were doing or where you were? Did that affect them at all? Did they ever talk about that much? Or?
Well, I'm sure that affected them, but we never did talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We never did talk about it. And actually, we don't talk about it too much now yet.
Yeah,
So.
right. In all these battles, did you guys ever come under attack by the Japanese, the ship?
Yeah.
What was that like? Hmm.
Well, we was at general quarters when off, we had to run on our battle stations all, and we had to watch. And if we didn't have no, we had to watch. And our gunners were actually the ones that had to do the watching, you know, and they actually they start shooting when the plane was maybe 60 miles away. They start shooting already,
Hmm.
until they come, you know.
Where was your general quarters? Where were you assigned?
Well, I was always on the flight deck, you know, and we had to. We was always on the side of the ship, and we were all working on it.
Right out in the open then.
Right
Huh?
out in the open.
Oh boy. Wow. Did the carrier ever take any hits?
Well, there was one time the carrier got bombed. The bomb hit us on that. And well, at that time, I was aboard that ship where I had to go down to mess cooking at that time, you know. I was down there for 6 weeks, and helped serve meals and stuff like that for 6 weeks there. And then while we was down there, our stations at Bell was on guns, you know. So I was on a 40 miller gun at the time, and when that happened, that I was on a 40 miller gun, and we was firing away with that 40 miller gun, and this bomb come in, you know, and exploded on the side of our ship and blowed a big hole into it. There's a picture in here, so if you want to look at it, right.
Wow. What's that like for people like myself and others that will watch us to be under attack like that? What's going through your mind? How do you? Obviously, you must be scared. I would assume. I mean, how do you function in conditions like that?
Well, we were so scared we just done what we had to do, you know. And well, when I was on the gun mount there, why I had to. There was clips of 5 shells in each clip, you know, and I had to hand them clips up to the next guy, and they handed to the ones that put it in the gun, into the gun, you know. So I was the one that brought it out of the cases, and it's, so, yeah, we had 20 miller guns on there. There's a whole bunch of them on the side of the ship on top on the flight deck, and then we had about 10 or so 40 miller guns on there, and then we had 4 5-inch two barrels on, you know, and we had 4 there. 2 in the front of the island structure and 2 after the island structure.
Hmm.
And when they went off, well, there was a bang.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the sounds and the sights.
That was a loud noise.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I can't imagine what the sight and sounds are like in the midst of battle like that. The explosions and the shells and such. During a battle like that, would you guys send off airplanes, or would you put a halt to all that?
Well, no. When we was on it, we couldn't send no planes off or land no planes at that. But we always try to do that before something like that
Yeah, okay.
happened. And we'd send off the planes, and then they had to make their runs, you know, and wherever they had to go, and then we had to wait maybe so many hours, and then they had to come back, and so we had to have that back end of the flight deck all empty, and no planes on, so that they could land, you know. And if one plane didn't come in just right, well, then he had to make another run at it and come make another run at it, so he could. And the signal officer that was back there, he signaled him in to land, you know. And if he wasn't coming the right way, he'd signal off and tell him to make another run at it. So a few of them had to do that every now and then.
Huh.
So they come in, see the ship was rocking, you know, and if the ship wasn't just right way, then he had to signal, fly them off, you know, and have to make another run at it. Then, you know, so. So.
Now, I've always understood that different groups up on the flight deck wore different colored shirts. Do you remember what colored shirt you wore? Or
Well,
did you?
We had just an ordinary, what do you call him, farmer's blue shirt, you know.
Oh, okay.
And then we had this caption of the buckle down here, so with all the wind and stuff and the breeze up there on top of it, we didn't have no white and the sailor hats on up there.
Well, I assume too, with the wind and the sound of the engines and such, you couldn't hear anything, so everything had to be, you had to do everything by sight, I assume, yeah.
Well, we had to, his. Yeah, we had to have them tied on them caps. There was just like a little stocking cap, you know. And in fact, I got 3 or 4 of them. Got that in my suitcase.
Is that right? Yeah.
And so.
Well, we know that it was a very dangerous position to be in. Do you remember any times when you felt like your life was in jeopardy or came very close to being injured at all?
Well, we was kind of scared to do this all, you know, crawling in between them planes and stuff. But then we had to do it, and you got used to it. And we didn't pay no attention to what's going to happen. But then I didn't see it when it really happened. But then one of our, I think it was a chief that happened to get hit with a prop, you know, and I just chewed him all up.
Oh boy.
And so they washed him off with a fire hose and washed it off and kept on going, you know.
Oh man. Oh.
You couldn't, when something like that happened where we had to stay with our job and we had to do what we had to do, and it was all over with, you know.
Well, I could see doing what you had to do while you were working, but what about, say, that night when you're laying in bed in your bunk, when you had really time to think about it, or did you just, were you able to put it out of your mind, or?
Well, yeah,
I mean, how did you deal with the stress? It seems like a very stressful situation. How would a person deal with it?
Well, we was scared all the time, you know, and we're worried. Well, how much longer are we going to be able to make it, you know? And but then we was fortunate that our ship was pretty lucky that she didn't get hit, no more hit than what she did, you know.
Yeah.
Because some of them ships, they really got hit out there, and it was bad. When they got hit with them kamikaze planes.
So you were never bothered by kamikazes?
Well, they was always around us, you know, try to come in and hit us too, you know. But we was either fortunate that our guns shot them up first, or well, we was lucky, you know. But some of the carriers, they took a beating on them. When they got hit, some like that Franklin, I think she had around 800 some people that got killed, you know. Just a kamikaze plane coming in like that.
Hmm.
And I think the Hornet, she got hit pretty hard, and she had around 600 people that got killed.
Hmm.
So when we got hit with a bomb, well, there was only 5 got killed on our ship. And and the bad part of it was there was one. The sailors that was on there, well, he was from Windsor too, you know. So there was actually a friend that was on the ship with me, you know. So, and when he got killed there, and I was on the side on a 40 miller gun, and he was up on a 20 miller, and he was on a flight deck too, you know, all the time. But then he had got 6 weeks of that mess deck, you know, where we had to go down, and he happened to be the same guy at the same time we went down the same time, and then he was on the 20 miller guns, and I was on the 40 miller. And while the bomb come down, I hit him. The bomb hit him first before it even exploded.
Oh.
And then went through the smokestack and through the that mounted gun on it there, you know, and then exploded on the side of the ship.
Hmm.
So that's where we lost 5 men, and I think there's about 20 of them that got injured, you know, from shrapnel and stuff like that.
Hmm. Wow. Was there anybody else from Windsor on that ship, or did you know? Or I guess another question is, in all your experiences, did you ever come across anybody from your hometown, or anybody you run into anybody that you knew throughout the war?
Not, well, this here one boy that, fellow that was, well, he was from Windsor here too, you know, and I knew him at home here, you know. In fact, they went to the same church we did, and I knew him like that, but I never really got
Yeah.
that close to him.
Right.
But then when we was on ship, every now and then we sat down, had a nice chat, you know, and even like I think 2 weeks before this happened, you know, he says he ain't gonna make it. I says, yes, you will. And he said, no, I'm not gonna make it no more. And well, then on March the 28th, well, that's 44 that we got hit, and in 45, I mean, not 44,
Mm-hmm.
44 we got hit, and he didn't make it then.
Hmm. And you guys didn't know? Did you know he was on the ship, or were you finally on the? How did you guys meet and know that you were both on the same ship? Did you know beforehand, or was it once you got on ship and just happened to pass him on the?
Well, I got, while the ship was in dry dock, he got to come home, you know, and that's how I got to know that he was aboard ship then, you know, that, and he was up on the flight deck too, you know, only he was a plane captain. When the fighter plane come in, he was assigned to one of the fighter planes, that he had to take care of that plane to clean it up and so it's in A1 shape, you know. So that was his job. So that he was always on a fighter plane, and then he had to take the trucks that we took away from the, and he had to take them and take them to the side of the ship. And so
Okay.
we pulled the trucks and handed it to them guys that was in charge of the plane, and they took it to the side of the ship.
Okay.
So.
How was it as far as getting news from the outside world? I know your sister would keep you informed about things, but was the Navy good about telling you news of the world and how the war was going and all that kind of stuff, or were you kind of isolated out there?
We got to hear the news and stuff like that, you know, pretty well, you know, but we was worried about what was going on out there. We didn't care too much, you know, about, except that once in a while they'd mention, you know, that happened over in Europe or something like that, but we got the news every now and then.
Would you get broadcasts such as Tokyo Rose? I mean, would that kind of stuff come out to you, or?
Well, the Tokyo Rose, well, that was, every now and then we'd hear about that, you know, but I didn't know too much about her, you know, but we heard about that when she was around, and said that this ship got sunk, and that's she's telling all that news to the American, you know, that we're in the war over there, and nothing to it.
Yeah. And you get word obviously, sure you got word that when President Roosevelt died and information
we got that, all that, we got that information right away too, right away. Well, our chaplains, we had two chaplains on the ship. One was a Catholic chaplain, and the other one was a Protestant chaplain. And the Catholic, he was the one that always made announcements and, you know, something like that, you know, what happened, and that Roosevelt had passed away, and they always informed us, you know, stuff like that. You know.
Yeah. How about let's come back here to home. How were things at home? Was your dad able to hold down the farm while you were gone, and how was he able to manage and with rationing and all that kind of stuff?
Well, they got along pretty good, you know, actually, and my brother and He stayed at home, and he was older than what I was, and he had to stay.
Oh, okay.
He didn't make it to the service, you know, and he stayed at home and on the farm
Oh,
all the
okay.
time. And so he helped on the farm, and then when they got where they had to have more help or stuff like that, and then they had my uncle come out from town to help in the hay operation, like dump breaking hay, you know, and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
But really, being on a farm, you didn't have to enlist. You could have got a deferment, probably. I'm sure, couldn't
Well,
you?
like I said, I got deferment the first time. I got it deferred, yeah. But then when the second one come along, and then I said, well, I'm going to go.
Is that right?
And
Huh.
I says, they won't let me get no deferment again, and so I says, I'm going to go. So,
Hmm.
so that was in May the 30th that I left.
Wow. Wow. Well, I guess we'll get here towards the end of the war. Do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard that we had dropped the atomic bomb and the war was over?
Well, we was out at sea, but then well, we must have been anywhere from Okinawa or Philippines in that area there, someplace. But where it was at, I didn't know. Or we just didn't know where we was at. And
Did you have any idea what the size of this thing was, or what it was? You know, when you first heard about it, could you imagine what this thing had?
well, we couldn't hardly believe that something like that would, you know. But then I guess that's what happened, though, you know. It just, in a way, it was good, you know, and then again, why there's just too many people that got killed, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just ruined everything, you know. But then in the long run, why it ended the war that much faster.
Yeah.
Well, if it wouldn't have been for that, why we'd probably been out there another 2 years or so. Yet.
Sure. What was? Do you remember that day when they announced over the intercom that the war had ended? Was there celebration on the ship, and what were you thinking that, you know, I made it through this, or?
Well, we all felt really glad to hear about it, you know, and we enjoyed hearing it. And then after the war, why, then they start giving us rides, you know, on them planes, you know.
Oh. Had you ever been up in an airplane before?
No, but then there's quite a few of them got to do that, you know, in our division, and got to go along up with the plane, you know, but then the fellas down below in like a gunner or engine man, what they didn't like that, so they had to cut the whole system.
Oh, did they?
So then we didn't get to go, you know.
Oh, so you'd never got it right? You got cut off before? Oh, that's too bad.
We didn't get to do that, you know. I was hoping that I could have got that done, you know, but I didn't get that far.
Well, I'm looking at the list of all the battles you guys were involved in, Okinawa and such. Now, would you come up close enough where you could see the actual invasion going on, or were you pretty much pretty
No,
far out to sea?
We was pretty far out
Oh,
to sea.
okay.
Yeah, we was out to sea. Like I say, there was one time we was 78 days without seeing land.
Yeah.
Well, we was always out far enough that we didn't see no land.
Oh boy. And I notice here the last note on the list is the occupation of Japan. So after the war, you guys went on to serve with the occupational forces then, or?
Yeah, we was out there for a while, yeah, and then we got to go into the Tokyo Bay.
Oh wow.
And then we made Liberty there in Tokyo. And,
Oh, talk a little bit about that.
well, we went in there and we was kind of scared, you know, when we was walking and we was seeing different places, you know, and stuff like that. I wasn't much of a guy that had to go out and investigate like a lot of guys. They had to go and see how far they could go, you know. And I stayed my distance and stayed more where it was safe, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Was the city pretty damaged?
well, that where we was at, we didn't see too much of
Okay.
it. There was too much damage, you know.
Did you have much interaction with the Japanese at all? the
No.
Japanese people?
No, not really, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
Some of them had, but then I didn't get that far.
And it says here occupation from August to October. So from the occupation, then you guys sailed back to the States, or tell the story from that point on.
Well, then after we found out that we got to go back to the States, why we went back to the States, and we and they left a bunch of the fellows that had enough points. They left them off, and but then the rest of them we had to stay on, and we went back to out to sea then again.
Oh, geez. So you didn't have enough points to get out.
And so we went back to sea again, and then we went out to Guam,
Oh.
and then they dumped me off out there then. So I was stationed out at Guam there from October then till last of January,
What were you doing there on Guam? What was your
And then
responsibility?
I was assigned in. Let's see now. Aviation supply depot. I was in the aviation supply depot, and that was a base where they brought all the the propellers and radio gear and all this stuff, for airplanes and that, brought it in there, and we had to destroy that. I run that little cherry picker, we called it, and we put the hooks onto it and just unload it, so get it unloaded from the truck, and we dropped them and just down the lake, Radio, expensive radio gear and all that stuff,
Huh. Wow.
And then there was one night there while I was at Guam there, where there was a pile of flight jackets, and those guys wanted one of them so bad, and we couldn't get them. They wouldn't let us have none. And then one night they set that on fire and burned them all up.
Just burnt? Huh. Makes no sense.
See,
Wasteful.
Yeah.
it was sad when you had to see something like that, and we wanted something like that and we couldn't, they wouldn't let us have it.
Huh. And then after your assignment in Guam, then is that when you were discharged, or where'd you go from Guam?
Well, after I got enough points, then they assigned me to a ship, then again, LST.
Okay. Landing
and,
ship
I
tank.
come home on one of them then,
Now that must have been a little bit rougher ride, because that's a flat bottom boat.
That's the point, that's
Yeah.
the rough line. It's a good thing we didn't get in no bad storm or so. But then, like on the big ship, we was in two bad storms.
That's right. There was that big typhoon, right?
Typhoon, there was two of them that we had.
What was that like?
One of them was in December of '44, and the other one was in June of '45, and they was rough. But then that big ship, they rode it out pretty good. But then they had some of them had a few damages, and lost a few airplanes on the ship, and one ship, the flight deck, not ours, was the one I don't remember now what ship it was. So the flight deck, it bended that way down in the front, the deck, and then and then when you see them big beams, how that water could do that.
Wow.
Bend the beams, beams, I'm gonna get so dry again. That one, I think that was the first typhoon that we got into. There's 3 destroyers got capsized. The waves got into the smokestacks and capsized.
Wow.
Wow.
And then we lost 3 destroyers that way,
What would you do as a sailor in that case? You just go into your hunker down in your bunk, or how'd you ride these things out?
No, we had to be up, and we had to help tie down the airplanes, with rope, and then we had cables, and took out cables and everything, because the rope, I snapped them a lot of times. We had to tie them down with cables and stuff.
It's a wonder you weren't thrown or
And-
washed off the deck.
Well, we was not that, it wasn't that bad, but it was dangerous, yes, but then it was off the ship that that number 2 elevator when that was sticking out, you know, that just all went down to the water, you know.
Wow.
And that was 87 feet up on the flight deck, from 87 feet down to the water.
Isn't that something?
And yeah, we had to tie the airplanes down, and a lot of it, you know, we had to do it 2 or 3 times, you know. And some of the carriers, they lost quite a few ships, you know, something like that. Especially the little carriers, most times they lost everything, you know.
That's something else. So where did so coming home now, you're on this LST. Where did you dock in the States?
At San Diego.
San Diego.
We went into San Diego, and I stayed there on board for quite a while, you know, and then I kind of lost track now of myself, and I lived how long I stayed there.
That's okay. Yeah.
And but then that's where I got deferred, you know.
And then took a train back to Colorado, or
And then, yeah.
took a train back to Colorado. Were you discharged here then in Colorado,
No,
or?
I was discharged at San Diego.
Oh.
Yeah, I got discharged in San Diego there, at the naval base there.
You remember what it was like when you first got back home to Windsor and finally being back home again? That feeling, the homecoming? Do you remember that day?
Well, I don't really remember that too much, but then we was glad that we got to come home, you know, and see, I had to stay in San Diego there for about a month or so, you know, before I got my discharge. You
Oh
know.
boy.
And so then we come home on a train and come into Windsor and here.
Did you have any cravings or anything when you got home? Mom's a particular meal you wanted your mom to fix, or was there anything that you'd missed for so long that you wanted to look forward to?
Well, I imagine so, but then I don't remember.
Oh, okay, okay.
So,
And then now that you're out of the service, was that much of a transition going from the military service now back to civilian life, or how was that adjustment for you?
well, to me, it didn't seem that it was that big a deal, you know, because I was a farmer's boy, you know, and so I come home and I would start working on the farm.
Went right to work. Didn't take any time off or anything. Went right to work, huh?
You know, it was in May there, and so we had to do some cultivating and stuff like that, you know. And the hay crop come along, and so kept us busy getting back in the gear again on the farm work.
Huh.
Yeah, so.
And then you went on to have a career. You took over the farm and farmed your entire life. Then,
Yeah.
yeah. And then when did you meet Betty? Let's add that story into the, and how'd that come
That
together?
was in '52, wasn't it? Well, then I have to blame my aunt she's from Saginaw, Michigan. She was out here, well, that was my aunt and uncle. They'd come out and visit us, you know, and I guess their folks, they knew about them out there too, you know, at that time.
Well, my mom and his aunt were cousins. And so then came out,
I'm gonna swing around and get you on this if you don't mind.
they had come out for a funeral up at Wheatland, Wyoming. And my folks were up there with his aunt and uncle, and they said, well, his aunt said, well, why don't you just come over to my brother's place, or my sister-in-law's place. And Mom said, okay. So here I was 17 years old, you know, what was I supposed to do? But Mom said, you go along. And because my other two brothers, they were older and married. And so we came over, and here I was, a young gal with all these older people sitting there around their way. And so finally his aunt said, well, why don't you go out in the kitchen where his brother and his wife were already married, had two kids, and his sister had a son. And he was sitting there, and she said, well, go out there and sit with the younger one. He gets, you know. So, we never said anything, and a couple of weeks later, when my uncle lived here in Windsor, my dad's brother, and so they came in to visit, and I took my cousin up to Rainbow meeting, and I was sitting in the car waiting on Main Street. And he seen me, and he'd come over and ask me if I wanted to go for a ride. So that was it.
I'll be darned.
So we blame his aunt for all of this.
Okay. Well, while I've got the camera on you, over the years, has Henry told you any stories, or is there anything you think that he's left out you would like him to talk about?
Well, he was pretty quiet for a long time. He never said anything until just, maybe the last 10, 15 years now, where we've met some of his buddies and got in contact with them, you know. And we had 4 of them, well, all 4 of the guys got together here in Windsor here, and we had a real nice time.
That's
How they got to meet.
That's a question I always like to ask. After the war, did you keep in touch with any of your buddies? Did you go to any of the Yorktown reunions, any of that sort of thing over the years?
Well, I belong to the Yorktown Association now. I've been keeping in touch with them all the time, and they send me a bulletin out 2 or 3 times a year, and nice articles that they send me. And then we went out 2 times and visited the ship while she's in dry dock in South Carolina there. We went out twice, once with a friend of ours and then the other time with our children, you know.
Now, is it still sail, or has it since been decommissioned?
No, it's decommissioned. It's in a museum now.
Oh.
And so that's where we went out and seen that.
And then you're saying you had a reunion here recently with some buddies?
Well, when the ship has a reunion, but no, I didn't ever go to no reunion.
But you had friends come here to visit, and
But then, yeah, there was one time we all got together here on Labor Day weekend, you know, and we had all 4 of us was together, yeah. And so that was real nice, you know. And one of them passed away now, and this one here, he passed away. And that other one, his wife passed away now. So, but there's one, the one that passed away, come out in the 70s, 1970.
They were from Iowa.
And from Iowa, moved to Loveland.
is that right?
And I happened to be over in Greeley, had much car checked over, a grease job or something. I had something done to the car at the Dodge garage there, and I happened to look up and seen this guy walking, you know. And I says, I know that guy. So I asked the mechanic that was working on my car, I says, what's his name? He says, Joe. I says, I know him.
Isn't that something?
And
Yeah,
so I went
seen
over
each
and got acquainted with him, and so we've been friends ever since. But then he passed away, but it's been about 20 years already now since. But his wife is still in Loveland here yet, and she they go down to Blackpool. I like it, but then I don't like the trip back and down, you know, so I don't go along.
Yeah.
I stay at home.
Yeah. Well, we'll start to wind down this interview. Is there anything I didn't ask you, or any stories you wanted to talk about? Anything we left out that you want to talk about?
Well, and another is that there was 2 Christmases I was away from home, you know. First one was on a ship, and the second one was out on Guam.
How was that? I mean, here, once again, many people in your generation probably didn't travel too far away from home, weren't away from home growing up. Did you get homesick? How was that, dealing with particularly holidays and just being away from home?
Well, it kind of bothered, you know, but then couldn't do nothing about it, so we just had to accept it, you know. And like I say, first one was on the ship, you know, in 44 there, and then in 45 I was on Guam there.
Wasn't it kind of strange to wake up on Christmas morning and look out at palm trees?
Well, I guess, you know,
Yeah. As opposed
well,
to
it wasn't-
possibly snow
well,
here.
Well, it didn't seem like Christmas, you know.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just, but then, what they gave us always a good meal, you know. We always we had good meals on the ship, you know, all the time. We had a meal, and when we was at general quarters and stuff like that, why, then we didn't get to go down to the mess deck thing. You know, we had to stay up on our quarters, you know, and then they brought up in big gallon jugs, you know, like tomato juice, you know, or soup, you know, and that's what we got.
Hmm.
But then that's when they brought it up to us, and we didn't have to go down then.
Yeah.
And then we was in the air department all the time, you know, and well, when we had to go down to the mess deck or something to get our meals, you know, at noon and that, or evening. Well, a lot of times they said, no, you just go up in the front of the line, and you know, there's always a line there, you know, for to go in for your meal, you know. And we got in for boy, and then guys down below, they didn't like that.
Uh-oh.
So, but then we had the authority, we could go ahead of them and to make sure we got down there fast and got
back up.
back in time, you know. So
Yeah.
that's why the ones that was down below, why they didn't like that. So they was always angry at us guys. So,
Well, they call these aircraft carriers moving cities. How many people? How many men served on that? Roughly? Do you remember?
well, on our ship, we had like 3,100 or something like that.
Is that right? Huh.
But that's with the pilots and all. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
But then without the pilots, there was maybe like 3,000
Yeah.
people.
Would you ever interact with the pilots down below in the mess hall or anything like that? Would you ever any interaction with them at all?
No, they was always separate, and we was always separate.
Okay,
And so
yeah,
no, we didn't. And they ate. They had their meals separate too, you know.
Hmm.
And what regular passenger crew members, you know, they had their big mess hall down on the third floor, you know, and they go down and have our meals every 3 times a day, you know, we go. And unless we was at general quarters, and then we couldn't go in.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, usually the last question I like to ask is, how did that period of time affect your life? Did it change your life at all? Change your thoughts about anything, or was it just a period of time in your life? How do you feel about that?
well, I don't know. To me, I didn't. Things really affected me too much, you know, that way. But I know we didn't like the idea of being out there, but then it had to be done, and I was glad that I could do it. And but then when it was all over with, we enjoyed that better. So.
Okay. Well, like I said, we'll wind this down. Is there any closing statement you'd like to make to finish off this tape? Anything you'd like to close with? Okay, okay. Well, Henry, I want to thank you for taking the time today to sit down and tell your story. More importantly, though, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
You got me now,
Your picture here, do you remember when that was taken? That was that prior to shipping out, or while you were
On the ship or something?
No, that wasn't done. No, there was no pictures taken out on the ship at all like that.
okay?
Or the,
Henry, can you describe here? Describe what we've got here.
Well, the ship had earned 11 battle stars through her whole history, you know. But then when I went aboard, then
You were involved in 6 of those,
I was involved in 6 of them, you know.
and that's what each of these stars stand for. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
Right, right.
Mhm. And this is your dog tag, right?
And my dog tag there, yeah. Yeah, that card was I mean, we wanted to make a liberty or something, why we had to make sure we had that in order to get off or back onto the ship. You know.
And then this top card?
That I was in the Navy. I mean,
Yeah, certified Navy.
yeah. So.
Okay. Can you describe this picture to me, Henry? Do you remember
Well,
where that was and who those guys are?
The four was aboard the ship, and we got to make a liberty at the States. Why we went always to a bowling alley or to a skating rink, and we made our liberties mostly at the skating rink and bowling.
And that's you on the left?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then next to you is Jack.
Jack Lynch and from Iowa, and Joel
Ray
Thor-
Davis.
Ray Davis was from Colorado, Bayfield, Colorado, and
Joel
Joel
Thorson.
from Iowa City, Iowa.
Okay. Now this is when you guys got together
Yeah, and
years later.
Yeah, that was taken up at Estes Park over the Labor Day weekend, and Ray Davis and Henry and Jack Lynch and Joel Thorson.
I'll be darned.
Great time.